say that we were ready for a good holiday is certainly an understatement. Kim had booked our stay at Exmouth a year prior, and we'd added a couple of nights in Kalbarri on the way up to break up the journey. Also, the last planned trip to Kalbarri had been cancelled due to Tropical Cyclone Seroja, which had heavily impacted the town. Now, the trip up to Kalbarri from Perth is around 600 kilometres, and even though that we were not camping this trip, getting everybody and everything into the car took some doing. As with most road trips, the obligatory stop and go was on the cards, and we had a few of these, but nothing that was too significant to cause delays to getting up to the town. On our arrival at Kalbarri, we found our way to our accommodation. We were staying at the Riverside Holiday Apartments, and it was all well sorted and organised, and we had a comfortable couple of nights in Kalbarri. The next morning we decided to go and visit the Kalbarri Skywalk and Nature's Window and potentially do a little walking around in the gorges. The inland gorges are cut into the sandstone by the Murchison River and are around 30 kilometres inland from Kalbarri itself. There'd been some heavy rainfall earlier, and this had resulted in fantastic river levels which made the gorges look great. The downside though was that Kalbarri itself didn't look so fantastic for having a very brown river running through it. The Skywalk itself was completed in June 2020 and is an impressive piece of engineering and art in its own right. There are two lookout sections that float out above the gorge floor far below. We had quite a lot of fun shooting some stills and video and doing some family poses. There were also quite a few sculptures of critters, large and small, modern and ancient, and Josh took some delight in posing with some of these ancient critters, much to the amusement of us as we looked. After the Skywalk, we took a drive to the Nature's Window site, and from the car park it was a short walk down to the window, and we had an opportunity to grab some photos. I decided that we should walk a bit further. This wasn't to say everybody was on board with this idea, and what felt like an infestation of flies had me doubting that this indeed was a good idea at all. We couldn't do the full loop walk due to the flooding which had closed part of the path, but we got along far enough into the walk to get some views from the top and again some more photographs. After a fairly comfortable night's rest, we did another walk in the morning. This time it was along the coast and visiting both Red Bluff and Mushroom Rock. Whilst it was a really beautiful morning, the wind was really blowing and quite bitey and cold, and it was instant regret for those of us who had decided not to wear longs. Despite this, we had some good sightings. Most of it was landscape and nature. We saw a couple of kangaroos, a couple of birds around. Nothing spectacular, but just a really pretty walk. Unfortunately, my Garmin hadn't, although I downloaded the course to it for the walk, it left off bits, so it was a little bit disappointing, cut short to about 5 kilometres. Nonetheless, rather worthwhile. After a short beach walk from Waitakere Creek, we popped out at the foot of Red Bluff. There's quite a few rock formations and just really a pretty spot. And Josh and Chloe had quite a lot of fun exploring the formations and taking a walk around. There's quite a few people down there as well, so enjoying the sunset. Some of them were fishing, others were just chilling out like ourselves. And there was a mob also doing a bit of a photo shoot. All in all, a really nice place just to unwind a little. Kalbarri, it was time to head up to Exmouth. We stopped briefly at Billabong to grab some refreshments, getting some much needed coffee, which I think both Kim and I were very much looking forward to. We also stopped off at the Gascoigne Bakery in Carnarvon and grabbed a few pies, really nice. And then up to Yardie Homestead, which is just on the other side of Exmouth around the peninsula. And we were treated to a really nice stay here. We were at the Yardie for 8 nights. And just some beautiful sunsets and sunrises, just a place to really unwind and relax. So this was where we were staying in the shearers' quarters. Another sunrise, another sunset, some lizards around, including the Parenti, largest lizard in Australia. Claire, what walk are we doing today? Mundu Gorge. The Mundu Gorge walk is a fairly short walk, just 3 kilometres, although it does involve a bit of up and down, so it's classified as a class 4 walk. And it's located pretty much between Yardie Homestead and Yardie Creek. Fishing in Exmouth is something that one tends to do a bit of, if you're that way inclined, and certainly if the 4 of us, 3 of us were happy enough to wet a line. Now it must be said that we didn't really catch anything too outstanding, certainly nothing that we could take back for a meal. Not from the beach fishing at least. But it was a lot of fun. Now on this spot we ran into a bit of trouble. It was very slippery, and combined with that the rocks that we had to walk across were very sharp as well. And so we didn't last very long at this spot, although Josh did pull out a half decent Charlie caught. But going back to beach fishing was where we found it most relaxing. And it's just, even though we were just mostly catching seaweed, it was just a really fantastic spot to be. I mean, views like that just are fantastic. This was the best I could do one day, all of about 6 centimetres. That's a Charlie caught that Chloe caught. More seaweed. Another Charlie caught. Another one. And then a stonefish, which required a little bit of extrication. And then Josh had the best, probably of the lot, which was a Borchin groper. All smiles. We did another walk from Yardie Homestead, and yeah, well, to say that there were a few flies would be absolutely true. Had a lot of beautiful vistas again, and some rather large bugs. This was an ant burrow that had been chiseled out of the path. So when the beach fishing wasn't working, and we had an anticipation that this would in fact be the case from our previous trip to Exmouth, well then one has got to resort to bigger toys. And I'd signed up for a charter on Blue Horizon, so a fairly large boat, and we were going to go about 50 k's offshore. So I didn't know any of these guys, they were just along also for the fishing trip. Some of them knew each other, it was fine. And off we went in search of bigger fish. Now the cruise out was about just under 2.5 hours. I'd been a bit nervous about being seasick, and I hadn't been on a fishing charter before, wasn't quite sure what to expect, so I'd packed some ginger in the bag. But it was all good, didn't need the ginger. And so here we are, just cruising out of Exmouth Harbour, and 2.5 hours later, thanks to the video edit, we have arrived at our first fishing point. One of the deckies is just giving us a run through. I didn't listen well enough because I managed to snag my line pretty much first drop out. They were kind enough to replace the terminal tackle. But I did have some success, and so that Trevally certainly got the arms working, and some Emperor as well, which I was able to take home. We did quite a bit of snorkeling, so down to the Cape Range National Park, and Turquoise Bay was one of probably our favourite spots. We were able just to get a real beautiful view underwater of all sorts of critters and creatures, including sea snakes and sea cucumbers and all sorts of weird things. Not all of those, of course, will be on the video, but there's a lot of coral around, and the beach is actually a good giveaway of that. The water's really warm, and unlike Perth, makes certainly an extended time in the water much more pleasurable. I still get Josh out in a wetsuit. He tends to still at this age get very cold quite quickly. All of us actually were quite happy in the water, and there was lots on offer to see. That's Norwest Blowy, rather large, 60-70 centimetres for this example, pretty poisonous as well. Again, just lots of coral and lots of tropical fish. Pretty much everywhere you look there was coral and fish at some of these spots. Certainly very rewarding. These little blackfish were quite inquisitive, or I actually think protecting their territory, so they were not charging the camera. fine example of a parrotfish. These bad boys tend to chirp it on the coral. Stopped off at Lakeside, where this footage is taken from, and we found a couple of these big rays, as well as a shark. So Kim and Josh had swum on back to shore a little bit before they bumped into the shark. Not literally, but actually went down to swim after a bit, but it wasn't having any of that, and it swam off. What did you see today?
A fish. No, this big.
Okay.
And also a massive school of fish about that big.
Okay. So this was taken from Oyster Stacks, which is another really nice snorkeling spot. Got to swum on the high tide, and you tend to see much less coral at the site, but probably a number of larger fish. And then saw a lot of birds around, and I enjoy taking photos of birds. Wedge-tailed eagle, zebra finches. Saw these just on the Yardie homestead, and some rainbow bee-eaters. They're gorgeous little birds. Crested pigeon, the galai, these are everywhere. Galais and crested pigeons in a tree. White-plumed honey-eater. This was a spinifex pigeon, which we hadn't seen before. And then a Australian yellow white-eye, and that's an Australian pipit, and a mangrove fairy wren, Caspian tern, blue-winged fairy wren, a beach stone curlew, and then a yellow-throated mana, and the Caspian terns again, Nankeen kestrel, sacred kingfisher. And then this was back down to the mangroves where we were looking for some birds. Caught up with the cows towards the end of our stay. So Malcolm, Alicia and Hayden. We enjoyed a dinner with them. And this was taken down by Tantabiddi boat ramp. And just some beautiful views there, which ended up seeing pretty much the end of our Exmouth trip. We stopped briefly in Geraldton for a night and grabbed a burger and some cool drinks at a local burger shop before heading home.